At dawn on September 19th, 2025, the calm waters of the Caribbean erupted into chaos. What began as a controlled U.S. Navy exercise suddenly transformed into a live battlefield. Inside a tightly restricted zone, guarded by no fewer than 7 American warships and a nuclear-powered submarine, a suspicious speedboat appeared on the horizon and accelerated straight toward the heart of the formation. The vessel had no business being there, and repeated warnings were ignored. Every radar screen tracked its movement. Every commander knew this was no routine encounter. Above the exercise area, an F-35 fighter jet circled, tasked with securing the skies and ensuring the drill remained safe. Pilots had seen countless training runs, but this was different. The speedboat's reckless push into one of the most heavily defended waters on Earth forced a decision no one expected to make that morning. In seconds, the order was given. The F-35 closed in, selected its target, and unleashed a missile. The weapon cut through the early light and struck with devastating precision. The small craft disintegrated on impact, a ball of fire swallowing it whole as dense black smoke poured upward. The sea itself seemed to recoil from the explosion, waves surging outward in violent ripples. And then came the silence, a silence broken only by the questions that followed. Was the decision to strike the right one, considering the warnings had been ignored? What does it say about the threshold for action when every option to de-escalate has failed? Stay with us as we uncover every detail behind this high-stakes strike. Don't forget to hit subscribe and join us here on Military Power, where we reveal the secrets others keep in the shadows. For decades, the Caribbean Sea has doubled as a contested arena in the hidden war over drug corridors feeding North America. From narco-terrorism campaigns to Southcom mandates, the U.S. government now treats that corridor as a strategic flashpoint, not merely a drug-smuggling highway. Through the doctrine of counter-narco-terrorism and the authority of U.S. Southern Command, the region has shifted from backdrop to battleground. Today, the Caribbean is treated not as a peripheral concern, but as the very front line of America's fight against the cartels. That context explains why this particular naval exercise was far more than a drill. On paper, it trained logisticians, air controllers, surface ships, submarine crews, and aviators to work in perfect synchronization. In practice, it projected dominance over waters the cartels have long tried to exploit. The exercise doubled as both rehearsal and deterrence, designed to intercept smugglers, deter infiltration, and, if necessary, neutralize threats before they could even approach U.S. territory. The message was unmistakable. The Caribbean is monitored, mapped, and defended. Against that backdrop, the sudden appearance of a speedboat turned the scenario on its head. At first glance, the craft seemed small and insignificant, but its defiant charge into a fortified zone rewrote the rules instantly. In these waters, every vessel is supposed to be cataloged, every silhouette accounted for. An unidentified boat racing across such a sensitive battle space could not be ignored. The question facing commanders became stark. If this zone is treated as the front line of national security, then where should America draw the line between routine defense and escalation, between tolerance and decisive action? Radar arrays and shipboard sensors lit up the moment the speedboat breached the exercise perimeter. It wasn't just any drill, it was one of the largest U.S. naval training operations in the Caribbean that year. Across the horizon, 3 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, USS Jason Dunham, USS Gravely, and USS Sampson, were locked into formation, their Aegis radars sweeping the waters. Anchored at the heart of the exercise was the amphibious assault ship USS Iwo Jima, flanked by USS San Antonio and USS Fort Lauderdale, carrying more than 4,500 sailors and Marines of the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit. Overhead, F-35A Lightning II fighters orbited with AV-8B Harrier IIIs, supported by MV-22B Ospreys, ready to launch raids or seize coastal objectives at a moment's notice. A guided missile cruiser, USS Lake Erie, reinforced the line, while the littoral combat ship USS Minneapolis-St. Paul patrolled closer to shore. And beneath the waves, at least one fast-attack nuclear submarine prowled unseen, tightening the net of control. Surveillance never stopped. A P-8 Poseidon long-range patrol aircraft, flying high above, was the first to detect the small craft's signature and relayed the contact back to the entire strike group. MQ-9 Reaper drones provided continuous feeds, painting a picture of every movement. Within seconds, the warning went out across every ship. An unidentified speedboat was driving straight into the kill box. Radio channels crackled with urgency repeated calls in multiple frequencies, demanding a change of course. Every attempt to speak had the same outcome: silence or defiance. The vessel pressed forward, accelerating deeper into forbidden waters, while perimeter ships braced for escalation. As the seconds ticked by, commanders had to determine the nature of the threat. A small boat, ignoring warnings inside a heavily fortified zone, could not be brushed aside. On the screens inside the command center, its path was undeniable. It was entering the kill box by its own momentum. When the target ignores every warning, what safer choice does the military have left? That question became painfully real. Should they risk sending interceptors from the sea with the danger of collateral damage, or strike decisively from the air before the threat could damage billion-dollar assets or slip away into the night? What began as a routine training drill suddenly turned into a crisis inside the regional command center. Operators watched as radar returns confirmed the hostile silhouette of a small speedboat slicing deeper into the exercise zone. This wasn't harmless wandering. The boat was cutting dangerously close to live naval maneuvers. Threads of ship formations, aircraft sorties overhead, and even the submerged track of a fast-attack nuclear submarine prowling beneath the waves. For the officers glued to their screens, the reality was clear. This was no ordinary incursion. It was an evolving threat to the safety of thousands of sailors and Marines, and to the credibility of the entire exercise. One collision or detonation at the wrong moment could have caused catastrophe, undoing months of preparation and placing American lives at immediate risk. The command team faced a decision no officer relishes. Boarding or intercepting the boat with surface craft would be too slow and expose sailors to potential ambush. Allowing it to continue on its reckless course was unthinkable. The vessel could close distance within minutes, potentially ramming into a billion-dollar warship or detonating against the hull of an amphibious carrier. Warnings had already been issued over multiple frequencies. Every attempt was ignored. The calculus changed. This was no longer a drill. It was now a defensive act to safeguard both national security and the personnel at sea. The order was given: engage from the air. Circling above the formation was a U.S. Air Force F-35 Lightning II, its systems already synced into the fleet's combat network. The pilot received the command and prepared a weapon designed precisely for this kind of scenario: the AGM-158C long-range anti-ship missile, better known as LRASM. Unlike older anti-ship weapons, LRASM is the product of decades of research into survivability and precision. Built off the Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile Extended Range, LRASM carries a 1,000-pound penetrator and blast fragmentation warhead and is engineered to slip past modern defenses. It can fly more than 200 nautical miles, hugging sea level to avoid radar, and uses a mix of sensors, GPS, inertial guidance, imaging infrared, and even onboard target recognition to autonomously locate and strike moving vessels. For the Americans in this operation, it offered the perfect combination: precision, standoff distance, and the ability to neutralize a target without risking a close quarters fight. The F-35 locked onto the speedboat, data relays confirming the trajectory. A moment later, the missile dropped from its wing and roared into the morning sky, skimming low over the waves at near supersonic speed. For those watching on radar, a new icon appeared, the weapon arrowing toward its mark. Within seconds, The LRASM closed the gap, adjusting in real time as the speedboat zigzagged across the water. The missile raced forward, and in just an instant, the situation flipped. What happens next? The cartel's speedboat never slowed. Instead, its engines roared louder, slicing the waves with a kind of reckless confidence as it drove straight into waters that had been declared strictly off-limits. For the U.S. Coast Guard unit shadowing the vessel, every nautical mile it covered was tracked in real time. Screens inside the command centers flickered with the boat's path, calculations running continuously, projecting where it would be within minutes. What had begun as a simple intrusion quickly evolved into something more dangerous. This was no ordinary fishing craft straying off course. The trajectory left no doubt it was heading directly into the heart of an American naval formation. As the range closed and the distance shrank, the decision became unavoidable. A fast-moving vessel, ignoring repeated warnings in such a fortified zone, could no longer be treated as a question mark. It was now a clear and imminent threat. Commanders knew what was at stake. Allowing the boat to continue risked catastrophic damage, whether by ramming into a warship, detonating explosives near amphibious carriers, or simply disrupting a major exercise involving thousands of personnel. The order came without hesitation. The strike would not be delayed. It was time to act. In the sky above, an F-35 Lightning II was already on station, its systems locked into the wider network of ships and aircraft. The pilot received the command, armed with the AGM-158C long-range anti-ship missile, a weapon designed for exactly this kind of scenario. Sleek and deadly, the missile was engineered to hunt moving vessels across the sea, combining stealthy flight paths with autonomous targeting. At the signal, the jet released its payload. The moment was almost instantaneous. The missile dropped, ignited, and hurtled forward at near supersonic speed. From the decks of nearby ships, crew members saw the plume skim low over the ocean before it disappeared on a direct vector toward the speeding craft. Within seconds, the strike connected. The speedboat erupted in a fireball, its frame torn apart as flames consumed the deck. Black smoke curled into the sky while burning debris rained down onto the surrounding waters. For a brief moment, the wreck blazed on the surface, then gravity and seawater pulled it under, breaking it into fragments that vanished beneath the waves. Yet the sea quickly revealed the truth. Around the impact zone, cargo began to spill free. Some containers were scorched and twisted from the explosion, others floated almost untouched. As recovery teams drew closer, the contents became impossible to ignore. Bundles of cocaine bobbed in the surf, wrapped tightly for transport, drifting among the wreckage. What might have remained speculation was now laid bare by physical proof. The Dominican Republic's National Directorate for Drug Control, known as DNCD, moved swiftly. Working side by side with naval forces, their teams fished the packages out of the water and piled them onto waiting decks. 3 lifeless bodies were recovered. When the count was finished, the numbers were staggering. 377 packages, totaling nearly 1,000 kilograms of pure cocaine. There was no ambiguity, no room for denial. The vessel had been a cartel boat, its purpose confirmed by the deadly cargo it carried. For Dominican officials, the discovery marked a historic first. Never before had such a large haul been directly tied to a joint maritime strike of this kind. Public statements praised the cooperation with the United States, calling the operation proof that decisive action at sea could cripple traffickers before their product ever touched land. What had started as a confrontation turned into a showcase of regional coordination, demonstrating that the strategy of striking smugglers on the open ocean could deliver results that interdictions alone had failed to achieve. This was not a mere warning shot. It was a decisive message, broadcast across the Caribbean and beyond. By removing a ton of cocaine before it could ever reach American shores, the United States had demonstrated that its rules of engagement at sea were not only justified but effective. Each kilogram prevented from entering the narcotics pipeline meant lives saved, communities spared, and networks disrupted. The operation showed that swift military action against narco-trafficking was not an act of escalation, but a necessary defense of national security. When the evidence drifts to the surface, bundles of drugs scattered like grim testimony, the mission requires no further justification. The strike spoke for itself, precise, effective, and essential. Within hours of the strike, the White House released a statement making clear that the decision to take down the cartel boat was not just a tactical move, but a matter of national security. The words chosen were sharp and deliberate, meant to leave no doubt about the seriousness of the situation. And then, President Donald Trump himself amplified the message, posting on his official feed, intelligence confirmed the vessel was trafficking illicit narcotics and was transiting along a known narco-trafficking passage en route to poison Americans. The claim that this boat was on a route to flood the U.S. with deadly narcotics immediately reframed the story from a distant maritime skirmish to something that touched every household. With fentanyl and cocaine overdoses killing over 100,000 Americans each year, according to the CDC, the idea that a ton of drugs could have slipped through was enough to stir strong emotions. Suddenly, what happened off the coast of the Dominican Republic was no longer a remote headline, it became a defense of American lives. Public reaction across the United States was swift. Many saw the strike as a decisive answer to a crisis that has felt unstoppable for years. Opinion polls and online forums reflected relief rather than outrage. Commentators on major networks pointed out that instead of allowing another load of poison into American cities, the military had stepped in to stop it at sea. In local communities hardest hit by overdoses, the story resonated even more. Families understood in visceral terms what 1 ton of cocaine could mean on the streets. The sense of support was not confined to American shores. Regional governments in the Caribbean, often on the front lines of transshipment routes, openly welcomed the move. The Dominican Republic's National Directorate for Drug Control, which had partnered in the recovery operation, praised the cooperation. For them, the incident was proof that joint action with Washington could deliver real results. Al Jazeera reported that Dominican officials hailed the seizure as a record-breaking haul and an example of why coordination was essential. This regional endorsement mattered. It showed that the strike was not just a unilateral show of force, but part of a shared fight against the cartels. For Washington, that public unity was critical. Military actions abroad often split opinion, but this one seemed to gather momentum in the opposite direction. News anchors, politicians, and local leaders echoed the same point. The strike was both justified and overdue. The result was a rare moment of consensus, a rallying point in a country often divided. Finally, the question naturally arises: when the White House openly backs such a strike and the people themselves cheer it on, how does that shift the balance of politics, both at home and across the region? The story of the intercepted cartel boat closes not with silence on the waves, but with a message that echoes far beyond the Caribbean. In just a few minutes, the United States demonstrated what happens when air and sea power converge with precision. The Coast Guard spotted the threat, warnings were issued, and when they were ignored, command passed the call to strike. Dominican officials later confirmed the haul, recovering packages of drugs that might otherwise have fueled the overdose crisis back home. What this moment shows is not just firepower, but professionalism. It is the discipline to detect, to warn, to decide, and finally, to act in the split second when hesitation could mean disaster. The crews on the water and the pilots in the sky carried out a mission with clarity and coordination, leaving no doubt about American resolve. And so the question is yours. Do you support decisive action like this, where a threat is ended before it reaches American shores? Share your thoughts below and stay with us here on Military Power, because the next chapter in this hidden war is already unfolding.